Hello YouTube, I'm Ephraim225 and I welcome you to yet another Mega Man playthrough. I just can't stay away from this franchise. I guess I just think it's too much fun. So yeah, we're playing Mega Man Xtreme for the Game Boy Color, and that is in fact what the game is called. It's super lame. Xtreme, very, very bad pun. I don't think that's what it's called in Japan. So what is Xtreme? Well, based on this intro stage, you might think that it is simply a port of X1 to the Game Boy Color, which would be an odd choice of console for a port, by the way, but they wanted some kind of portable Mega Man, so they figured, let's just put X on the Game Boy Color, that won't mess up anything at all. But yeah, no, this isn't exactly a port of X1, it's kind of a mishmash of X1 weapons, bosses, stages, and such, and X2 weapons, bosses, and stages. It's the same weird thing that the Game Boy Mega Man games did, but unlike the classic Game Boy Mega Man games, I think Xtreme was a little more successful at this kind of thing. Oh, by the way, floating platform. That's one difference from this game and the original. You can't have a floating platform in X1. But yeah, I think they were a little bit more successful with Xtreme, even though I think Xtreme is honestly just a watered-down port of various stages and such from the X games, the first two X games. Xtreme 2, on the other hand, is a lot better, but it still has problems. Anyway, the intro stage boss is Vile again, but he's actually killable this time, so that's yet another difference from the original X1. The plot of this game is that someone has hacked into the Maverick Hunter database and stolen all of the Maverick data, and they've used that to recreate all of the stages and bosses or something like that. It's very weird. And also, it's obviously an excuse to just have us go through all of the bosses again and yet not make this a straight port with the same storyline, so I don't know. Whatever. We're going to Chill Penguin stage first because, yet again, the armor upgrades are back and they are in the... Well, in Chill Penguin's case, the armor upgrade is in the same location that it was before. So we'll be getting the leg upgrade again, but you've probably noticed. We can dash in this game, so what is the leg upgrade going to do for us now? Well, actually, it is going to give us the ability to automatically dash jump off of walls. This game, since the Game Boy Color only has, like, not nearly as many buttons as a Super Nintendo controller does, what they've done is that they've gone and made the dash button the start button, which, if you were thinking that is completely terrible and awful, yes, it is completely terrible and awful, and I am thankful that emulators allow me to map that button to something like L or R. Something that's much easier to hit at the same time as the jump button. Also, we have X2 armor in the... Yes, I died there because the X2 right armor has been put into an X1 stage, and I forgot about the ability to hold down the Y button in order to charge up a super dash, which caused me to fall off and die. But yeah, no big deal, the checkpoint was right behind me anyways. So yeah, it would be very, very awful if you had to press the start button in order to dash jump off of walls, so they made the leg upgrade allow us to automatically dash jump without having to push any additional buttons, which is very nice and very courteous. So even though I think it's very weird for them to port Mega Man X to the Game Boy Color, at least they knew what changes that they needed to make. Or at least they knew some of the changes they needed to make. They knew the important changes they needed to make. We're up to Chill Penguin now, and he has been made slightly more annoying because he has more attacks and moves where he becomes completely invincible. Like, when he normally creates the ice statues, he is not invincible at that point, but when he creates the ice statues in this version of the fight, he does become invincible, so it's going to take a little bit longer to beat him, as long as he opts not to just stand there and do absolutely nothing. Still not really a difficult boss under any circumstance. There are bosses that do become more difficult because of the screen size. They gave X a new sprite instead of just using the one from the SNES games. Obviously, they would do that. Unlike in the Game Boy Mega Man Classic games, where they used the same sprite from the NES games, and that was a little too big for the Game Boy screen, in my opinion. And I've made a couple mistakes here, so this is going to come down to the wire a little bit. But yeah, I think they handled the screen size in relation to Mega Man and the bosses much better than in classic Mega Man Game Boy games, but there are still bosses that are much harder to avoid because of the screen size. Spark MANDRILL is going to be an example of that, but we'll get to him later. And that was very close. I almost died there. That a hit from Chill Penguin there would have really done me in there. And that would have been very embarrassing because dying to Chill Penguin, who does that? No one has died to Chill Penguin. I've died to Chill Penguin. Yes, I admit it. So the weapons are pretty much the same as in the X games. But it's going to be very weird to take on some bosses with X1 weapons because you have to go up against some X2 bosses with X1 weapons. Or do you? I think I just used the Buster on those guys as much as I could. So moving on to Storm Eagle. And since we've got a stage with a legendary soundtrack, I would like to say that the soundtrack in this game was handled very well. The port of the music to the Game Boy Color was handled excellently, and it's still pretty nice to listen to Storm Eagle's theme here. Also, that was a sub-tank instead of a heart tank. The heart tanks and sub-tanks are still kind of sorta in the same locations. There are a couple of differences because you don't have access to certain weapons that you did in the X games on the SNES. But they, for some reason, decided to switch the locations of the sub-tank and heart tank for Storm Eagle stage. Also, that rising elevator platform isn't there, so you actually have to enter the area here with a heart tank in reverse, and there's no enemy inside either. And you can, actually the stages are much smaller as well, so you just saw me pull off a big skip. That wouldn't have worked in the original X1. Right, so I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of dead air because I can only really talk about the differences because anybody who watched the X1 playthrough has already seen basically, like, everything that you're going to see in these stages, so I guess it's worth pointing out that they still have the double tap dash, and if you are playing this on the original Game Boy Color, you actually need the double tap dash. It's going to be very difficult to make certain jumps by pressing the start button to dash jump over them. So I just got the helmet upgrade, which crushes certain blocks. We're going to need that for some of the upgrades later. And, yeah, you've probably noticed by now, but X doesn't get a change to his sprite until you've collected all of the armor upgrades. So we're not going to see that nice new armor. By the way, you know that trick with the original Storm Eagle stage where you could hop onto the back of the plane and get to the elevator that takes you up here that way? You can't do that in the Game Boy Color version, so don't do that in the Game Boy Color version. But yeah, Storm Eagle is basically the same. He's got all the same moves. I suppose since your charge shot covers more of the screen, then I guess taking out the little birds that he spawns is a little bit easier. Still have no idea where that comes from. Do they just get produced in his body or something? I know he's a robot, but even robots need ammo. I would imagine as much anyways. So you might have noticed there were a couple glowing pillars of light that tell me that the game has auto-saved when I go into them. Those are both checkpoints and they auto-save the game, so if you lose power for some reason or if you turn the game off and you want to start from your checkpoint, you're allowed to do that once per checkpoint, which is really, really nice, and it allows you to kind of abuse it a little bit because you can like either start from checkpoint in order to have another shot at the boss if you died to the boss, or you could start from checkpoint and then intentionally kill yourself so that you don't use up any of your sub-tanks. Like maybe you used up your sub-tanks on the boss and you don't want to have to go through collecting energy for it all over again. So anyways, we are in Flame Stag stage, which is the first X2 stage we're going to. And there might be a couple questions on your mind regarding the X2 stages, such as what happened to the X-Hunters? Like, are their doors still there? Are the armors still in the same places? That will be answered shortly, but first I want to point out how lucky I was to pick up that extra life from that very specific enemy as I was going to get the heart tank. Also, they've moved the... what is this? I think this is the body armor, but they've moved it to Flame Stag stage. There was no armor in Flame Stag stage originally, but they've moved it here. And as for the X-Hunter door, it's still right above the armor upgrade, but if you go in it, you will actually fight a brand new boss. Yes, but killing him does absolutely nothing, and you're going to fight him again in the Sigma stages anyway, so there's really no point to taking him on now. I'm of the opinion that they should have put the armor upgrade behind that boss instead of just putting it right beneath the guy and letting you skip him completely. Much like how I think that the X-Hunters in X2 should have been carrying X's armors instead of Zero's parts, but that's just me. We're moving on to Flame Stag, who is the same as usual, except now he is weak to the Storm Tornado because of course you don't have access to Bubble Splash because Bubble Cramp's not in this game. Darn shame, I know. Everyone wanted to see Bubble Crab and jump over his head for several minutes. All over again, I'm certain. But yeah, having a little bit of trouble with this at first because screen size is making it a little bit difficult to avoid collision damage with him because you don't have as much room to run around in. That's going to be a problem with Spark Mandrill as well, who I'm going to right after this boss. And, yeah, there's not really much else to say about Flame Stag. And there's probably not going to be much to say about Spark Mandrill either, besides the fact that since you don't have the Boomerang Cutter, the sub-tank is now guarded by blocks that you have to crush with a leg upgrade. So anyways, I'm guessing you were probably wondering what was up with those difficulty options at the title screen. So this game does something very, very weird with the difficulty system. The game doesn't really get harder on hard mode, and it doesn't really get harder on extreme mode. The way this game works is that when you first play it, there will be 4 stages, and then you will go to the fortress levels, and when you beat those, you will then unlock hard mode, which is 4 more stages, and then you go to the same fortress stages again, and then you unlock extreme mode, which is all 8 stages, and then the fortress levels once. So yeah, that's very, very weird. I don't know why they did it that way. I guess it was just because they wanted you to be able to complete the game in a timely manner, because this was portable, and portable games, they often are designed with a different mindset than when you are making a console game, because with a console game you can assume that the players have all the time in the world because they're playing it at home, but portables, that's a different story. Anyways, what's really, really strange about it is that when you beat the normal mode and you go to hard mode, you can actually transfer your save data to hard mode. There's no real reason not to do this unless you want some kind of extra challenge. And all of the armor upgrades for X are in normal mode, so you can collect all of those and then take them to hard mode, which ends up being super, super easy because you have all of these armors, upgrades, heart tanks, sub-tanks, and the weapons too. So like, why didn't they just make the game 8 bosses with the armor upgrades hidden throughout the stages as normal? I don't really know for sure, but yeah, obviously for this playthrough I just wanted to play on extreme mode because that gives you all 8 bosses, you only have to do the fortress stages once, and it skips all of the story cutscenes, which I also appreciate because you've already seen those already, and come on, story in a Mega Man game, yeah, the usual argument. So yeah, you have to climb up here to get the arm upgrade, and you have to crush through those blocks with the head upgrade, so yeah. They're actually getting quite a lot of mileage out of the ability to crush through certain blocks, because you have to do it to get the sub-tank in this level, you have to do it to get the head upgrade in this level, and you need it a couple more times in the other stages anyways. Or do you? I actually can't remember at this point, but I suppose we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We now have all of the armor and upgrades, which means X gets a sleek new sprite, and we now have the pink charge shot, which does 3 damage to bosses, and it doesn't have that glitchy hit detection that it did in the original X1, so that's nice. We can use it to defeat Spark Mandrill, who is much more difficult actually, primarily because you actually won't see the punch attack coming. It's very difficult to react to it and dodge it appropriately. The best way to handle this is to stay as far away from Sparky as possible, and then just jump if he goes for the punch attack. But if he bounces a little bit before, well, when he lands, if he bounces a little bit, you know that a punch is not coming, because he's gonna jump into the air anyways. So, I almost got killed here, but luckily, I was able to do enough damage in time, and I'm lucky that that punch at the end there did not do enough damage to kill me, because then I would have been very, very embarrassed. So with 4 bosses out of the picture, we are now going to go to the hard mode section of levels. Yeah, those first 4 levels that I played, those were all in normal mode, and now I'm going to go over to the hard mode levels. starting with Armored Armadillo to round out the collection of X1 bosses. And this is a stage that did not survive the transition very well, in my opinion, because the best part of Armored Armadillo's stage is the minecarts, and those have not... I want to say they haven't aged well, but that's not really what I want to say, even though it feels like what I want to say. Anyways, you don't even get to use them for that long, because the autosaves, they also serve as... I guess they mask loading times? Something like that, I guess? I don't really know why you would need loading times in a Game Boy Color game, but whatever. Right, so I'm going to foolishly shoot at this digging robot. I don't really know why I did that. I kind of let it destroy the terrain before I could go up and get the health recovery item. Not that I need it. And the heart tank for this level is also a little bit silly. We'll see that coming up. Oh, and you could actually outrun the camera. Did you see that? That was really weird. I don't know why, because you can't outrun the camera earlier on in the stage, and then this next minecart coming up, you can't outrun the camera. So I wanted to destroy this thing before it got to the part of the wall that you need in order to go up and get the heart tank. But as you can see, I was too late. I guess the speed burner does not damage that guy enough. I should have used the storm tornado. But hey, it turns out that if you make a pixel-perfect jump up there, you can get the heart tank anyways, so it doesn't even really matter. And also, there are absolutely no enemies until the minecart, and I don't really know why. Maybe it has something to do with that whole thing where the game actually can't load an infinite amount of data into the console's computer at once. I don't really know for sure. But, moving on, you're probably wondering, since this is Armored Armadillo stage, if the Hadouken is in this game. Well, it isn't. You don't need to kill yourself over and over to get this capsule, but what it actually does is the hard mode stages all have capsules in them, and they all give you the ability to summon Zero, instead of like Hadoukens or any additional upgrades or anything like that. The Zero summon abilities, I've never really used them. Like, I don't really see the appeal for them because they're screen clearers. They don't really offer that much. But it is nice to have Zero at your beck and call, and he becomes playable in Xtreme 2, so that'll be something to look forward to. Alright, so I'm going to use the Electric Spark on Armored Armadillo because I do not want to spend a bunch of time shooting at Armadillo over and over again. Like, waiting for him to drop his guard and all of that. I'm just going to do this the nice and easy way so it doesn't take as much time. We have to fight him again in the refights anyways, because of course there would have to be refights. Again and again and again. Everybody loves boss refights, even though it's so easy to beat them now that it doesn't really matter. Like, there's not a whole lot of challenge to Xtreme 1, I would say. It's a decent, like, port of content from X1 to X2, but I wouldn't say the challenge is really there all that much. Maybe in the Fortress levels. But anyways, I'm saying that as someone who's very skilled at Mega Man, so don't take my word for it. I always think things are easier than they probably actually are. Anyways, moving on to Wheel Gator. Unfortunately, this lacks the scrolling background, and it should be obvious where the capsule is going to be, with the extra Zero summoning ability that I'm never going to use. I'm not even sure why I picked these up, if I'm not going to use them. I guess I thought maybe they would be useful at some point, but I never really found any use for them. It's not like they do a ton of damage to bosses. Also, they each have their separate energy meters. So, yeah. They're like rushed utilities, honestly, which is kind of hilarious to think about. Also, this is where I really started to notice that the charging sound effect kind of interferes with the otherwise nice music. So moving on, we have the X2 armor ride thing, and this is actually causing some sprite flicker because there's so many of these guys on the screen at once. There's so many big sprites, rather. Alright, so you can in fact charge all of your special weapons when you have the arm upgrade. They didn't forget to implement that, I just haven't been using it. So, like in the original version of the stage, actually that wall is actually a bit lower than in the original version of the stage, so that's nice. It's easier to get that heart tank, and you still have to have the same idea as in the previous version of the stage. So, moving on, this is where the X-Hunter would normally be, but instead we have a new boss made specifically for this game. There really should have been a lot more bosses made specifically for the Game Boy Color games, but there aren't really a whole lot. This guy is known as Gimil, and yes, that's what he's called. He just teleports around a lot and throws stars in this initial version of the fight, but he's going to show up again in the Fortress stage along with his buddy Zane, who is another new boss, and they still kind of kept the day-night cycle of the stage by making it night in the latter part of the level. That's kind of nice. So moving on to Wheel Gator. Wheel Gator is a little bit easier because they've given him more vulnerability frames, if you want to call it that. He's still a little bit annoying, and this graphical effect is actually really awful because you can see that some tiles have been clipped off the bottom part of where that, what is it, mud, lava, I don't even really know. So you can actually hit him more often than you could originally. You could not hit him while he was doing that bullet attack, but now you can, and I think he's overall actually improved over the original version of this fight because he does not spend as much time in the mud. I'm gonna call it mud, even though it's bright red. And also, X doesn't bob up and down with the flow of the mud as well, and he doesn't chew up the walls and leave spikes there either, so this is a little bit more improved than the original, and he can actually chew up the spikes at the top of the screen as well. So yeah, in case anyone was wondering by this point, I started commentating over this fight and then found out that I had a death in it, and that took up a lot of time, so I decided to just edit out the death, and now it's going to look very weird when you guys watch this. That's going to be so strange. Consequence of not previewing all of your video before you start editing it, because I thought I had gotten this all done in one flawless take, but apparently that wasn't the case. So yes, we now get the spin wheel, which has some actually pretty good uses in the upcoming stage, which is Magna Centipede. No, I'm sorry, it's Morph Moth. My mistake. I forgot the order I played this in. Oh, this commentary is falling apart so fast. So anyways, Morph Moth is up next, and they've kind of butchered his boss battle a little bit, but we'll talk about that later. The heart tank is in the same place as normal, but the ceiling has been lowered, so you don't really need the Crystal Hunter to get up here, because you can't even have the Crystal Hunter. So there you go. That's your heart tank. The capsule is in the same location as before, and you have to do the same thing as before in order to get it. I would argue that it's even worse in this case because you do not have the head upgrade from X2 that would normally allow you to find this thing in the first place. But I suppose if you remember the original location, then it's fine. What was even the point of this game, honestly? Because they've copied so much from X1 and X2 that it kind of doesn't seem like there's a purpose to this game at all. I mean, if it was to just put X1 and X2 on the Game Boy Color, then I don't really know why they would call it Xtreme and pretend like it's anything different. But anyways, moving on to the mini-boss, this mini-boss can actually be destroyed instantly with a charged spin wheel. Blink and you'll miss it! Yep, the thing jumps out of the robot and right into the spin wheel projectile going behind you, so that's pretty cool. You can save a lot of time with that guy. I wonder if anyone seriously speedruns this. Oh, of course, there's gotta be someone who seriously runs Mega Man Xtreme. Like, why wouldn't there be? It's a Mega Man game. There's gotta be a speedrunner somewhere. Right, so we have the area with the bugs that cause you to jitter, and you have the jitterbugs. I just got the pun behind their name. They're jitterbugs, of course. They're bugs and they make you jitter. It's fantastic. And I'm just filling dead air while I fight the second mini-boss in the same exact fashion as the first. Isn't that nice? This is getting a little bit boring, but luckily there's only Morph Moth and one other stage to get to before the Fortress stage, and we're only 23 minutes into the video. How can we be only 24 minutes into the video with like 4 more stages to go? I've got a bad feeling about this, you guys. I don't remember everything about this playthrough, but I'm starting to have a bad feeling about this. Alright, so Morph Moth has been, well, he's still got the 2 phases to his fight, but he's basically been reduced to 2 attacks. One of these is the rotating junk attack, and he's got the attack where he goes into the ground and spins around. Those are the only two moves that he has. He doesn't have the move where he swings back and forth, which is very unfortunate because it's going to now take an absurd amount of time to destroy him now because he's invincible for one of his two attacks, and he would normally have a third attack where he's not invincible, but I guess they just didn't want to they didn't want to risk screen flicker by having so much junk flying everywhere. And the appearance of the MOTH form is not nearly as grandiose. And he's a little bit more difficult because it's actually harder to avoid that laser because it's a series of projectiles instead of just one straight laser that instantly appears. Yeah, and it actually does track you that way instead, so this is a little bit different from the original version of this fight. A little bit tougher, in fact. MOTH being a challenge. That's gotta cause someone to have a headache somewhere. I know someone who it would cause a headache too. Alright, so moving on to MAGNA Centipede. This is gonna be fun. You remember how the original version of MAGNA Centipede had that wireframe boss? Well, they can't do it anymore, so they just repeated the mini-boss over and over again. As one YouTuber might say, repeated, boss fight, boss fight. But yeah. So, not much else to say. The stage is basically the same as it was with the alarm system and everything. They're a little more forgiving, though, because, well, I don't know why I triggered that searchlight over and over again. I guess I thought I was going to miss the heart tank, or what is this, the sub-tank? But no, that block actually stays there, just so long as you don't go into the pillar of light that causes an autosave and forces you into the next area, and that is in fact a heart tank. Very close to the beginning, easy to pick up, and I can't believe I just did that. That was stupid. I can't believe I forgot that. Well, either I forgot about that or I accidentally dashed, because when you have double tap dash, it's actually very easy to trigger it by accident. And they did not think until Xtreme 2 to turn off your... Was it Xtreme 2 that let you turn off the double tap dash? No, I think it was 04 that let you turn off the double tap dash, but I'm actually not sure. I'm sure I'll remember by the time I get to Xtreme 2, and it's very easy to get to the sub-tank as well. You don't really need that extra block that would normally be there, if you had gotten there quickly enough. And as for the mini-boss, again, the spin wheel, when charged, is pretty much a boss killer. I think it is interesting that they make you fight this guy 2 times, because the first time he has no chance of being powered up, and the second time you fight him, he still has a chance of being powered up if you got caught by that scanner, or whatever it's supposed to be. So the spin wheel does take him out rather quickly. You actually can't let go of your charged spin wheel until the current spin wheel is gone, which is why it took a little bit longer to destroy that guy. So we have the falling area, which is actually not that long, and now we're in the area with the scanner and the falling blocks, which don't do anything because they don't form a wall. The X-Hunter door for this stage is simply not there anymore. And I don't even know where the X-Hunter door for MORPH MOTH stage is, so I have no idea where that is. Alright, so this is the last of the Zero Summon abilities that I'm not going to use. And now there's going to be dead air for a little while, so, hope you're okay with that. Because we have the mini-boss that we have to deal with again. I did not get caught by the scanner, so this is the same as always. And, did I switch to something for this? Oh, I actually tried one of the Zero abilities. Alright, so that's what the Zero Final looks like. And it probably did not do that as much damage as I was hoping it would. But at least I demonstrated it for you. That's important. To at least demonstrate it for you guys. So we just have one more stretch of area before MAGNA Centipede is over with, and we can move on to the fortress levels. I'm still concerned about how we can only be half an hour through the video with only 1, 2, 3 stages to go. This is not good. Alright, so MAGNA Centipede is the same as always. He still has that poison mechanic if he decides to draw you into his little tail there and inject poison into you. And he still has all of his attacks from the original game. You can still use the Silk Shot to destroy the tail if you really want to avoid those attacks. Which is probably what I should have done because this takes a while. assuming you don't take advantage of his position and shoot him a bunch while the tail attack is going on. But now he's going to start with a poison. I think this first one causes me to not be able to charge, which is fairly annoying. And if you don't dash away from the second poison, then you're going to not be able to dash. Or does it just take away your ability to fire more than one shot at a time? And now he's at the point where he uses 3 tail segments instead of 2. More poison. He just keeps injecting me with the poison, even though I'm pretty sure it ran out of effects. Alright, so how many bars of health does he have? He's got like 6 or 7. And X is getting injected again. And I'm out of things to say. 4 hits to go. I should have just used the silk shot. What was I thinking? 3 hits to go. 2 hits to go. And 1 hit to go, and it's over. We're moving on to the fortress stages. Isn't that fantastic? So the fortress stages we are going to deal with are the first Sigma stage from X1, and for whatever reason the third Sigma stage from X2, but the boss is not agile, it's actually surges. That is weird. But let's stick to the X1 stage first. It still looks pretty nice. The graphics are pretty nice for this. I know they're basically piggybacking off of X1's graphics, but they managed to make them look very nicely on inferior hardware, which is pretty impressive. I hate these platforms, by the way. They're not positioned exactly the same as they were originally, and dash jumping is still kind of a pain, because for whatever reason my emulator likes to drop the inputs. I'm not actually sure if that's my emulator, or just my controller, or just me being weird. I don't know for sure. But there's no Vile rematch, even though they could have just stuck a Vile rematch in here, I guess. Instead, we get to fight against the 2 mini-bosses that were placed in the places where the X-Hunters would normally appear. First up is Zane, and Zane is basically Robo Cloud Strife, considering how huge that sword is. But he's very, very easy. All you have to do is just jump over him when he does the spinning move, and dash under him when he does the giant leap move. And then hit him with Shotgun Ice, which is his weakness. So yeah, even these new bosses that they've created are basically, like, they're... what do I even call them? They're not interesting at all, because their patterns are very, very easy to figure out, and you don't have to really do anything special. Okay, so immediately after that, you would only fight Zane on normal mode, and you would only fight Gimo on hard mode, but on extreme mode, you get to fight them both. And Gimel is a little bit different from the first time we fought him. His weakness is his speed burner, by the way. I forgot to point that out. So in this first phase of the fight, he will just throw those weird stars at you. I'm getting hit by them way more than I should. I think I just wanted this over with as quickly as possible. But when he gets to half health, he will start getting onto his... I don't even know what that thing is. A kind of kite, but it's very easy to destroy him now. He just holds his star to his heart like he's... I don't know what he's doing. I don't know who that guy was. Forget about him. He's not important. Let's move on. So just a little bit of a stretch. Oh wait, actually, I forgot about the segment with the bouncy platforms. These are still fun, except if you are not careful, you will get hit by the shield robot at the end there. So I very foolishly decided to just damage boost my way through most of this. You don't have the charged Sting Chameleon, so you can't really use it, of course. In fact, they don't use Sting Chameleon in either of the 2 extreme games. That's kind of unfortunate. I wanted to break the game with a really overpowered weapon. But anyways, this is where I started to get a little nervous, because if I die here, then actually I just go back to the autosave, so it's not even that painful. But I kind of wanted to get to Bow Spider without losing another life, so I could just suicide on her and get all my health back. By the way, yes, it's Bow Spider again, so I guess this is how it took so much time to deal with this, because it's such a long boss. She's slower now. They made Bow Spider slower. Oh boy, we're gonna be here a while. See, this is the thing. I don't really know what the purpose of playing Xtreme would even be if there wasn't a bunch of new bosses and content to explore, because anybody who's played the SNES games has already seen all of this. They've already seen all of this. They've already, like, gone through the motions and all of that, so I don't really understand what the purpose of this was. Like, what is Xtreme's purpose, if you think about it, really? You know, I wouldn't be surprised if people tuned out of the video right here and now, because honestly, there's nothing new at all until the end, and even then, that's not really new. Now that the bosses past this point are even all that new, it might be amusing to see who the boss of the second stage is, because, as I mentioned, it's Surges instead of Agile, even though it's Agile's stage. Any moment now, this will all be over. I've got all the armors and upgrades, so it's really not that hard. This is not worthy of being called Extreme Mode. Extreme Mode would have taken away all of my armors and upgrades. Alright, so that's that. We're moving on. Just have a couple more stages. Boy, oh boy. You know, I'm actually going to be excited to commentate over Xtreme 2 because there will be a lot more to talk about and therefore a lot less dead air, because Xtreme 2, it doesn't, like, try to port stages from the SNES games. It does kind of port some segments, but a lot of segments are actually new, and that's both good and bad. The bosses are the same until the fortress stages where they start to do new stuff. So that'll be neat to look at. Also, since it's Agile stage, I should point out, there is in fact an alternate path. I don't really know if the Shoryuken or Hadoken or anything is down there. I think there is. I remember reading about Xtreme 1 having a Hadoken. And it might as well be in the same place as the Shoryuken from X2. But I don't know if you need to collect all the items and everything. I don't really know how to even get up there, considering that you can't use the Crystal Hunter. I guess you would need to carry the platform all the way up there, and that would be a really obscure method for getting it, but I don't need a Hadouken. I'm perfectly fine with the weapons I've got, so let's keep going. This is a section coming up that is very, very annoying on Game Boy Color, because, again, you have to either use the start button to dash jump over these, or you have to use the double tap dash, and what's even more annoying is that those two platforms are actually destroyed by the leg upgrade, so if you cling to them with your legs, they're going to be destroyed, and it's going to be even more painful trying to cross with platforms missing, so I don't really know why they made those two blocks destructible. There doesn't seem to be much of a point to it. So as I said, Surges is the boss, even though Agile is the stage they are copying off of. You can destroy the cannons much easier than in the original with the charged electric spark, which means that weapon finally has a use. And his weakness is the rolling shield, which is actually very easy to hit him with, because you just have to be above him. Very nice and easy. And the bullets come out in a little bit of a different pattern, but they're mostly the same, so yeah. Not the hardest boss in the world, especially with as many heart tanks and upgrades as I've got. Alright, so that's the two fortress stages dealt with, which means the next part of the game is... Get ready for this, it's the boss refights. Oh, this is going to take forever. There are only 20 minutes of this video to go, and they're going to be taken up entirely by boss refights. We got a short segment beforehand, though. And they actually put spikes on the wall, so you cannot simply climb up those walls and use the dash jump off walls to get to the ladder. So, good on them. Also worth noting is that the final boss music from X1 is now a stage theme, which I think it works either way. Boss theme, stage theme, they're both pretty nice. So begin the boss rush. We're starting with Spark Mandrill, and we're going to use the charge... Did I use the charged shotgun ice? Yes, I did. It's actually much easier to hit him with than the original because it bounces off of walls, and it's actually fairly amusing too. Alright, I'm officially convinced that there's going to be nothing to say about these boss rematches, aside from the fact that you actually have to use the speed burner against two bosses because it's strong against two of them, Chill Penguin and MOTH. So, I guess I will use this time to talk about Xtreme 2, because odds are I'm going to play it eventually. In fact, I have the footage for it recorded, so I have played it, and I'm probably going to commentate over it eventually. Not sure whether I should wait until I play X3, though, because it has a couple of bosses from X3. So that'll be weird to see X3 stuff before having actually played X3 on the channel. But I suppose by this point, anybody who's watching my videos has seen all of the X games, if they're even remotely interested in Mega Man X anyways, so I should probably stop thinking about that kind of thing and just get to talking about Xtreme 2, because Xtreme 2 is a much more standout game than Xtreme 1 was. Like, for starters, Zero is actually playable in Xtreme 2, and he functions not like Zero from X3, which was boring, but more like Zero from X4, X5, and X6. I believe X4 was either out or close to coming out by the time they made Xtreme 2. By the way, the magnet mine is now Wheelgator's weakness, because Crystal Snail's not in this game. Anyways, so they made Zero playable in Xtreme 2, and Iris is a character in Xtreme 2. She's from X4. And there's also a part system like X5, so yeah, these are some pretty cool ideas that they're coming up with, and they make Xtreme 2 stand out quite a lot. And I actually was starting to like Xtreme 2 a lot more than Xtreme 1, for one thing. Except for the fact that there are some very glaring issues with the level design, and we'll get into that, but let's just say they pulled an X6 in Xtreme 2. That's pretty impressive. Because X6, what I'm referring to is there are parts of X6 that you cannot complete without certain parts, items, or upgrades, or weapons, which is not really a good thing if you want to, like... I think they did that just in order to stop people from completing the game without clearing a few bosses first, but it's pretty glaring to go through an entire stage with a certain armor and then find yourself blocked at the end, because you picked the wrong armor and the jump that you have to pass doesn't let you get by without some other armor. That's the kind of thing I'm referring to. If you miss one of the armor upgrades in Xtreme 2 for X, then he has a segment of the game that he cannot complete, at least as far as I know. I mean, it'd be crazy to think that they pulled an X6 in one of the previous games, but, you know, it could happen. They could make a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. Anyways, enough of my rambling, because we're about to see something interesting with the current gameplay, and that is that there is in fact a glitch in Xtreme 1. I actually found this as a kid, but I was very happy to accidentally recreate it in this playthrough. So you'll notice that the camera is now behaving very oddly. This is because the camera in the boss rematch room is very buggy. Depending on where the camera was when you entered one of the refights, it will assume that the level geography is in the same position, but the camera is not in the same position. So that can cause some very weird issues. It will cause the game to think that oh, he actually Shoryuken'd me. How funny. And he did it again! But it's still not doing that much damage. So this is actually going to cause problems with one of the rematches specifically. If the room is just the same horizontal length as the screen itself, then it's going to be perfectly okay. But when we get to the Storm Eagle rematch, that's going to be fun. The camera isn't actually going to move at all, but Storm Eagle is still moving around. And I also kind of have to fish around for the capsules because, oh, actually it's moving to the left now, so that's fine. So yeah, you're gonna see that the screen, the camera does not move in this room for some reason. And the spin wheel is Storm Eagle's weakness because you don't have Sting Chameleon's Chameleon Sting. Yeah. So this glitch actually makes it impossible to finish the game, but luckily you have the auto-save feature, which lets you turn the game off and then reboot and then get back into the stage like nothing happened. So I'm eventually going to use that when I declare that the stage cannot be completed like this. And geez, he's off screen and he's still doing his attacks. That's kind of funny. So now I have to get him on screen in order to do the last bit of damage here. Luckily that didn't take very long. Alright, so are there any bosses left? There's one, by the look of it. And I should probably pick up those health recovery items, because I gotta fill the sub-tanks too. I never fill my sub-tanks, all 4 of them at least, in Xtreme 1, because there's not really any boss that requires it, except for maybe the first Sigma form. But yeah, here we go. I've got to use the rest of my speed burner on Chill Penguin. Gotta find the frames where he's not completely invincible, and you can still get frozen by the ice statues. I'm actually going to run out of ammo here. He's invincible more often for some reason. Now I get to switch to the Buster. Just gonna take him down with Old Faithful, as I like to call the Buster sometimes. Actually, I don't call it that. That's stupid. Old Faithful. Give me a break. I just gotta wait out the rest of this fight. I'm lucky that pink charge shot still does 3 damage. That's really nice. Actually, it's Chill Penguin, so shouldn't the regular charge shot do 3 damage? I don't know. I thought Chill Penguin was supposed to have less health than the other bosses, but I suppose that's not the case anymore. Alright, so he's gone. That should be the last rematch. We can move on to the finale. As soon as we climb up here and get into the teleporter, maybe pick up the other recovery item. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. And now here's where the camera glitch comes into play, because as you can see, the level geography is the same, but the loaded enemies are several yards behind you, so they can't actually hit you. And you can't even go back and destroy them either, because the game doesn't think you're even there. It thinks you're later on in the stage, and this is where the boss door should be, but the boss door sprite is not loaded. So, oh, you can destroy them, okay. So, in order to make this work, I don't really know if there's any way to make this work without resetting. So I'm eventually just going to reset the game and load my autosave. Yeah, kind of unfortunate to do that, because you lose that second chance against the boss, but it is nice to have a little bit of insurance in case a glitch like this occurs, and I have a full sub-tank. That's gonna be good. Oh yeah, they have a couple of extra features in this game as well. They have an auto charge, which automatically charges the Buster. No reason not to turn it on, I guess, unless you want to, like, not make the game easier. That's basically what it is. It's a thing that makes the game easier. And they also have the rapid shot, which I never use and should never be used because it well, it doesn't prevent you from charging. I think it prevents you from charging your special weapons because you'll be rapidly firing them instead of actually charging them. Alright, so now that we're past that, it's time for the final boss. First up is the Jedi Sigma form, which they have improved a little bit, and by improved they mean it takes even longer. Because now he actually blocks with the saber if you hit him on the ground. Occasionally he will do that if he's not in the middle of another attack. And he will actually do the sword swinging animation, and he will actually fire bolts from his forehead. But the problem is that it's still very easy to trivialize this fight by just jumping into the top of the screen here. Yeah, of all the fights that they maybe should have changed up or done something completely new with, this was probably the one, but they just didn't. Oh, that's so very unfortunate. And as you may have noticed already, I've edited out a death because I very foolishly died when this guy was down to 1 health. That was very, very awful and embarrassing, but luckily nobody will ever have to see it. Alright, so if this guy will stop swinging his swords and actually jump to the walls, yes, there we go. And he just has to do it a couple more times. Luckily, the fully charged charge shot is not difficult to hit him with, and it does the same amount of damage as his weakness, which is still Electric Spark. And Rolling Shield is still the weakness of his final form, and how did I do 2 damage there? That was strange. You better believe I'm going to use the Rolling Shield on his final form. There's such a short room here. There would have been a cutscene on the other difficulty modes, but we're on Extreme mode, which has no cutscenes. So yes, Rolling Shield, and this boss is incredibly pathetic. They have completely ruined how epic this final boss is. Look at what he's doing with his face! Is that his lip? Or is that really his grin? I don't really know for sure. But yeah, they tried to make it not as possible to just cling to this wall and fire off rolling shields, but due to the screen size being small enough to where you can actually hit him with a rolling shield from here, it's very possible to do that, and there's nothing really stopping you either. These claws can't hit you if they move up, The only thing that can really hit you is the lightning bolts, which only hit me one time, and he rarely does it anyhow. Oh, I suppose that crawling spark could have hit me, but even then I would have just dropped onto the claw had I not been down to a little bit of health left anyways. Also, that final boss music was a remix of the X2 final boss theme, if you could not tell. So yes, that's all of it, and something has gone wrong with our recording because this is not how this song is supposed to sound. The director is that guy. The planner is Okamura. Time to make fun of the credits. Because I don't know what happened with the credits just now. Asagiri 3. That's gotta be like a pseudonym, but why would they be using pseudonyms? There's no real reason to use them at this point in time when the game was released, but I'm not the developers, they can do whatever they want. That was Mega Man Xtreme. These images are all from the plot, which I don't know anything about because I don't remember the plot at all. But yeah. Yeah, how am I supposed to tell who the character designer is when they sign their names like that? Really? I mean, jeez. So, Xtreme 1, if they were trying to simply port stages from the SNES games to the Game Boy Color, then fine, they've succeeded. They've done pretty much what they set out to do, but I'm of the opinion that they really should have, like, maybe thought up some new stuff for us to play with, like new stages and stuff, because the graphics turned out nicely. They can do some cool stuff, but they didn't really do some cool new stuff. Which is why I'm glad that they did do cool new stuff in Xtreme 2, but Xtreme 2 still has problems of its own, which we will get to in the inevitable video on that game, because, you know, I've talked about it so much, I might as well do it now. The recording is already there. That's the end of Mega Man Xtreme 1, and we are going to get a message from Sigma for beating Extreme Mode, because of course we are. He has to do this every game. Bye, everybody!